Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Frame the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. So game journalists have revealed information that I was talking about a week after launch of Hi-Fi Rush, in that the fact is the game bombed. There is no denying it. There is no disputing this. This was always on the table. This was always very clearly evident. There were numbers that suggest this. People ignored me. They tried saying that everyone was playing the game on Game Pass. People were saying this was a huge success. It was a huge hit. It shit all over Forspoken, or Flopspoken as they called it. This was one of the games of the year, even though it came out in January before we got games like Fire Emblem Engage, games like Octopath Traveler 2, Cereza and the Lost Demon, Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is in all likelihood going to be the real game of the year. There was this very big push, coordinated push, to present this idea that Hi-Fi Rush was this great game from Tengu Gameworks and was a huge hit in the making. It was a huge cult classic and it was going to just do gangbusters. And I immediately wrote this off for what it was. It was a shill campaign, right? Just like that campaign earlier this year where people tried pretending The Last of Us Part 2 was good, just like the one last year with Cyberpunk Edge Runners and the patched, fixed Cyberpunk 2077. It's a good game now. That whole shebang. The typical pattern we see every time that the establishment wants to push a specific product onto us is that they just get a bunch of people, YouTubers, influencers, bots, to try and spam message boards and try to spend a couple of weeks to inorganically talk about a product that nobody cares about. And in this case, it was Hi-Fi Rush, right? A mediocre beat 'em up from the creators of actually good games, games like God Hand, Vanquish, people who have a background in making really good action games. So the fact is, if you were familiar with this team, what Tango Softworks, I don't ever even GameWorks, if you knew what they've been putting out for the past 10 years, you would not have been in any way invested in this game or what they were doing, right? You would have known that that they've always put out mediocrity. They've always been making mistakes. They've always been doing all this stuff. They've always just fallen far short of their potential, especially after the initial success of Platinum Games or what they were doing. The Evil Within was a disaster. Everything the company has done has been bad, in essence, and nobody wants to admit it because it's not a Nintendo affiliated brand, and this is a Microsoft owned studio now, and people were really trying to push this narrative that this was eventually going to be a major studio for Xbox. And look what happened. They put out a shill campaign. They made this budget action game. They tried presenting this narrative like they did with Sunset Overdrive, that oh man, look how wacky and surreal this is, and nobody really cared. There was an initial wave of praise and attention, but now it's completely fallen by the wayside, and all we have are the cold hard facts. That the game did not do very well. Xbox Game Pass does not save games like this. People need to stop pretending that normal people are scrolling through Xbox Game Pass playing everything that comes out, because that does not happen. Okay? It just doesn't. Just getting through the Yakuza games alone. You can look at Yakuza trophies trophies on Xbox, right? And you can see just how many people play Yakuza and then just drop it immediately when they realize it's not a AAA game, right? You can see. I'm sure you can see that with Hi-Fi Rush and essentially every other game on Game Pass. If people tried Hi-Fi Rush, they played it for a couple of seconds and then just dropped it. It's not typical for Xbox Game Pass fans to stick with any of these games for any length of time. And as a result of that, by what metric can Hi-Fi Rush be considered a success? If people aren't playing it, if they're not talking about it, if it's not something that's actually pulling people in and getting people excited about the future of this company and the studio and maybe the future of the IP, then how exactly do you measure success? How exactly? You can't even say you got the money from consumers because it's locked behind a subscription service. So nobody's playing the game, nobody's enjoying it, nobody gets any real value out of it. I can see why Shinji Mikami left the company after this. I can see why he's done and why he's gone back to like shilling for Resident Evil 4 and Capcom and stuff like that. Like I would be mad too. You know, like looking at this, like seeing this push, but like to try and push a product that was niche, that had a small audience, as like this big mainstream thing, it just doesn't really work out very well. You know, it just makes you look like you're trying too hard, and that like you don't have a real leg to stand on, because like, oh, look at this game, isn't it unique and different? Why aren't you making more games like it? If it's so successful and so popular, why is this not like standard for Xbox? You know, like, and the answer is just, it's not all that popular. Like everything Xbox does is doomed to failure, right? You know, that extends just past Hi-Fi Rush. Like all of my issues with this don't really, Hi-Fi Rush itself doesn't have anything to do with it, right? Like I think this was an attempt at like trying to sell people on Game Pass, right? Like look at this game that came out of nowhere, released on Game Pass, and ooh, everyone's talking about it for a couple of weeks. Download Game Pass and you can get it right now for free. It didn't work. You know, it fell flat on its face. So I'm curious if anyone else has noticed this or has brought it up at all. I think very few people like acknowledge that Hi-Fi Rush was a bomb right from the get-go like I did. I think most people were like adamantly like defending the game right until just recently. Now that it's time to like shill for like the PlayStation titles, like we're seeing people like turn their backs on Hi-Fi Rush and trying to talk up like Resident Evil 4 remake, and you know that'll be eventually like pushed to the side in order to promote something else. It never ends with these people, right? They're not actually interested in talking about cool, new, interesting games. They just want to sell you on products. And that is why you cannot trust game journalists or YouTubers.